Well, I think we have all experienced a form of change. Have you experienced a form of change,
Well, yeah, when I first came from India, I mean, it was fun, but the cold really surprised me.
Well, I presume so. But isn't it in India? Isn't the weather completely different?
Yeah, I mean, but as Anusha said, like after climate change, I guess those things are always changing. Which actually reminds me of Sai.
Yeah, please welcome Sai.
So I would like to start by telling you guys a little story. As a kid growing up in an Indian household, we would visit my grandparents every summer. They lived in the south of Tamil Nadu. So we would go over there every summer, and it gets extremely hot in Tamil Nadu, with temperatures soaring well over 40 degrees. So my grandparents, as farmers at the mercy of the shifting weather, were lucky enough to have plentiful rainfall throughout the monsoon season for several years. The water dams could sustain farming throughout the year, but unfortunately, with the onset of slow, erratic climate weather patterns, we had a drought one year. There was a severe shortage of water. I must have probably been 7 years old when I was completely surprised to see my grandfather shift away from farming. He decided to start up his old ground-up mill business again. I, as a 7-year-old, was obviously surprised. I had grown up seeing lush green sugarcane fields, and I decided to ask him, why change so quickly? Why not persist with farming? I will never forget his response. Change is the only thing that's constant. If nature itself decides to undergo constant change, then who are we as humans to resist it? So is change really constant? Is it inevitable? I would like for us to take a closer look at something that's really interesting here. So how many of you take chemistry? Well, I'm sure all of you have heard of what an atom is. So atoms came about around 380,000 years after the first Big Bang, which was 13.8 billion years ago. So I want you to imagine any atom. Let's take hydrogen as an example. So a hydrogen atom that came about 380,000 years ago is the same hydrogen atom that we have now. But can you guess the number of proposed models that we humans have to explain the structure of an atom? 7. There's been seven different models that have been proposed to explain the structure of a hydrogen atom. I have the rough timeline here, but I'll go over the highlights. We initially had a breakthrough discovery with Dalton stating that the atom is the smallest indivisible piece of matter. Then Thomson came out and said that no, electrons are like the proton stuck, electrons are like the plum stuck in a pudding of protons. The Bohr model then went completely the opposite direction and said, no, electrons are not stuck in this proton pudding. Rather, they move around in circles around this bunch of protons, or what we now know as the nucleus. Currently, we explain the structure of an atom using the electron cloud model. But how do we know that the model we have now is correct? How do we know that one of you sitting here might wake up in the future and completely revolutionize the way we explain the structure of an atom? What we consider the holy grail of chemistry, or a theory that's factually indisputable and is the crowning jewel of physics, a person years down the line might look back and go, what were these guys thinking? You see, the interesting thing is, this phenomenon of change and paradigmatic shifts resonates through every field. For instance, consider psychology, the study of human behavior. There have been so many shifts in the way we explain and approach studying human behavior. In the 1930s, psychologists were largely influenced by behaviorism. So they solely wanted to focus on the testable and the observable. But how could this work? How could you really study human behavior without understanding feelings? This led to another shift in the way we explain human behavior, cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology involves studying processes like emotions, thinking, and problem solving. You see, one could argue that human behavior has changed slightly over the past century. But has it changed as drastically as the methods of approach to studying human behavior suggest? In fact, these methods continue to change even today. So what is the common feature of change? Not only in these fields, but also in others. It's the fact that we humans constantly edit, we constantly change, but most importantly, we constantly improve. As creatures, we are wired to seek new information, to be curious. This is what makes us humans so prone to change, to be dynamic. George Lowenstein, an esteemed economist, conducted some research into what drives this curiosity and this change in human beings. He defined curiosity as a cognitive-induced deprivation arising from the perception of a gap in knowledge. So he stated that curiosity functions just like any other primal need, like hunger or thirst for water. This craving for a constant intake of information primes us humans for change. In fact, we are so primed for change that we constantly seek new information, even if it holds no apparent benefit to us right now. Change is intrinsic to us. In fact, you are all changing right now. Human beings are still evolving. We are biological creatures after all. Change is a fundamental law of nature. Tectonic plates shift, glaciers melt, and species evolve. So I guess my grandfather was correct. Change is the only constant in our lives. Thank you.